Charlie Geyer is one of the legendary trumpet professors that I got to study with when I was at Northwestern University doing my master's degree. Charlie is known for many things: his beautiful sound, his incredible articulation, but anyone who's studied with him knows that the thing he is most known for is his obsession with intonation on the trumpet. So that's what we're gonna talk about in this video. We're gonna talk about why the trumpet is so out of tune, what we can do about it, and I'm gonna give you a couple of exercises that will be able to help you develop better intonation in your playing. When you're playing a trumpet and you play a note that doesn't require any valves to be pressed down, all of the notes that you can play open, the length of the trumpet, the tubing length, is exactly correct for those notes to be in tune. When you play a note on the trumpet that requires the second valve to be pressed down, what happens is the valve gets pressed down and a pathway opens up for the air to go through that was not previously available, and it basically just adds the length of tubing for the second valve slide, allowing the tubing to be longer, which makes the overall pitch sound a little bit lower. When you add this length of tubing from the second valve slide, it's still in tune. Things are still good. You're not having any problems at this point. The same goes for the first valve. When you need to play notes that require first valve, you press that down, it sends the air through the first valve slide, and this allows that length of tubing to make the note a little bit lower, and it's a little bit longer tubing, as you know or you can see, and so it creates a little bit lower note than the second valve. Things are still in tune, the tubing is long enough, everything is good at this point. You start running into problems on the trumpet when you start compounding these different valve combinations. When you play notes on the trumpet that require first and second valve, second and third valve, first and third valve, or first, second, and third valve, the length that you add in terms of the valve tubing is not long enough. So these notes don't quite get down into the pitch where it's in tune. So now that we understand the problem, let's talk about the solutions. Well, one solution that a lot of players will do is they'll just try to lip the note down in tune. They won't use their valve slides. Instead, they'll think, I'll just kind of push this note down and everything will be fine. It sounds a little bit like this. The other option is to use all these valve slides to lengthen the tubing to the right spot so that the sound can be in tune. It sounds like this. So in one sense, both of these solutions will create the same result. What you'll get is on the tuner, these notes will be in tune. But hopefully you can hear that the difference between these sounds that these solutions create is quite different. When you bend the note down, you're no longer in this resonant part of the sound where everything is full. It sounds a little bit different than notes around it. When you throw out your valve slides, you stay in that resonant part of the sound where everything is ringing and beautiful, and you have a lot more consistency of sound from top to bottom. To further complicate matters, let's talk about partials and the intonation tendencies of the various partials on the trumpet. If you're not familiar with what a partial is, it's another way of saying which part of the overtone series you're currently playing. The overtone series is a series of notes that you can play without changing any valves. So when you play open, you have a lot of different notes that you can play, and when you play second valve, you can play a whole bunch of different notes. The partials are where you are on this overtone series. The first partial on the trumpet is the pedal fundamental notes that we don't play that often. The second partial is where the low register lives, that ends with low C. The third partial is then G. The fourth is third space C. The fifth partial is E. The sixth partial is G. The seventh partial is B flat. And the eighth partial is high C. Now, we know it can go way higher than that, but for the purposes of this discussion, we're gonna focus on the second to the eighth partial. The fifth partial on the trumpet is a little flat. This is why you may see people who are playing C trumpets playing 2 and 3 for E flats, 1 and 2 for E's, and even sometimes 1 and 3 for D. The sixth partial on the trumpet is sharp, which is why it's so difficult to play F, F sharp, and G on top of the staff and get it in tune. It always seems to ride a little bit high and maybe sound a little bit pinched. Here's a chart that describes all of the pitch tendencies of the usable range of the trumpet. I'm gonna leave a link down in the description that you can go to and download this for yourself and have it as a reference so that you can know which notes seem to go in which direction so that you can have that information. So knowing how out of tune the trumpet is and what the various tendencies of these notes are is a really important, good first step towards making progress, but it's not enough to be able to develop good intonation. We need to use this knowledge to be able to develop the ability to understand what notes sound like when they are in tune. You see, when you're playing the trumpet and you listen to yourself most of the time, you get used to what you sound like. You get used to your intonation tendencies. And so even though you may be playing out of tune, it sounds normal to you. You think everything is fine. But I can tell you, even as a highly developed player, it's incredibly easy to develop blind spots in relationship to intonation. Developing great intonation on the trumpet isn't as simple as just trying to get the note in the center of the tuner and it says, good job, you're in tune. You need to make sure you're saying, okay, when that note is in tune, I need to start listening to what it sounds like when it's in tune, and then make an effort to begin to try to create that sound when you're playing, so you're proactively trying to create an in-tune sound. As promised, here are a few ways that you can go about developing good intonation in your practice session. The first method that I recommend is the tuner method. I guess I'll call it that. What you're gonna do is you're gonna put a tuner in front of you and you're going to play long tones. You're just gonna hold a note for any length of time, but long enough that you get comfortable with it. And you're gonna close your eyes and try to play the note as in tune as you possibly can. You're gonna listen for the sound and try to make sure that you're making the most beautiful in tune sound that you think you can, and then open your eyes. Whatever the tuner says, if it's sharp or flat or in tune, that's not telling you it's sharp, flat, or in tune. That is telling you that you hear that note sharp, flat, or in tune. If you find yourself to be a little bit sharp, just adjust down a little bit and try to reframe your understanding of what that particular note sounds like when it's in tune. The same goes for when you're playing flat. Just try to get the pitch up a little bit. If you need to move your tuning slide a little bit either way, you can do that. But note that if you're constantly moving your tuning slide for every single note, the problem is not with your tuning slide, the problem is with your ear, your airspeed, and your overall skill. Another method that's enjoyable to use is to use a drone. I typed in tuning drones on Google and found a website where I could have just a octave or a single note, or I could make a third or whatever intervals you want. And then you're going to play a long tone along with that and see if you can get everything to gel kind of nicely, I guess. If you hear a lot of waves and beats and things like that, you know you're a little bit out of tune and you want to manipulate the sound a little bit till you begin to hear everything being in harmony and cohesive, that the sounds of the drone and the sound of your trumpet aren't fighting each other. Changing the way that you hear your sound and the way you hear things being in tune or not, it takes time. And it's not necessarily an easy process. So be patient with yourself while you are learning how to reframe what you sound like on the trumpet, and just be very diligent to make sure you're not just going through the motions, but you're actually trying to figure out where am I in tune and where am I not in tune, and how can I learn what in tune sounds like. Developing great intonation on the trumpet is an incredibly important skill, but it's not the only important skill. If you want to know what I think about other skills on the trumpet, click the link on the screen and we will see you in the next video.